In the history of Al-Tabari, we learn that Muhammad was suicidal before the first verses of the Quran were revealed to him. During one of his annual pagan religious retreats, a spirit appeared to him and said, "Muhammad, you are the messenger of God." Muhammad then ran home to his wife Khadija and begged her to cover him. He was so terrified that he contemplated suicide. We read in Al-Tabari Volume 6, page 68, "He, Muhammad, said, 'I had been thinking of hurling myself down from a mountain crag. But he appeared to me, as I was thinking about this, and said, Muhammad, I am Gabriel, and you are the messenger of God. Then he said, Recite. I said, What shall I recite? He took me and pressed me 3 times tightly until I was nearly stifled and was utterly exhausted. Then he said, Recite in the name of your Lord who created. And I recited it. Then I went to Khadija and said, I have been in fear for my life." Notice that Muhammad was already suicidal when Gabriel started revealing the Quran to him. Gabriel had appeared to Muhammad, terrifying him and causing him to think about killing himself, and only then did Gabriel give him the opening verses of Surah 96. But Muhammad was also suicidal after Gabriel began revealing the Quran. According to Ibn Ishaq's Sirat Rasulullah, our earliest detailed biographical record on the life of Muhammad, page 106, Muhammad wanted to kill himself even after the revelations started, because he believed that he was possessed by an evil spirit. Muhammad was having a nightmare about a spirit physically attacking him and forcing him to recite verses of the Quran. When he finally agreed to recite the verses, the spirit that attacked him said, "Read, in the name of thy Lord who created man of blood coagulated. Read, thy Lord is the most beneficent, who taught by the pen, taught that which they knew not unto men." Muhammad narrates, "So I read it, and he departed from me. And I awoke from my sleep, and it was as though these words were written on my heart. Now none of God's creatures was more hateful to me than an ecstatic poet or a man possessed. I could not even look at them. I thought, woe is me, poet or possessed. Never shall Quraysh," that's Muhammad's tribe, "say this of me. I will go to the top of the mountain and throw myself down, that I may kill myself and gain rest. So I went forth to do so, and then, when I was midway on the mountain, I heard a voice from heaven saying, O Muhammad, thou art the apostle of God, and I am Gabriel." So Muhammad received the revelations, but after his encounter with Gabriel, he was convinced that he was possessed by an evil spirit. Since he didn't want his tribe to know that he was possessed, he decided to kill himself. But Gabriel stopped him. Gabriel had his work cut out for him, however, because Muhammad had a habit of trying to jump off a cliff whenever he was feeling bad. When Muhammad's wife Khadija saw that her husband was suicidal, she and her cousin Waraka talked to him and convinced him that he wasn't possessed. He was a prophet of Allah. But Waraka soon died and the revelations suddenly stopped. Guess who decided to kill himself? Let's find out in Sahih al-Bukhari, number 6982. But after a few days, Waraka died, and the divine revelation was also paused for a while, and the prophet became so sad, as we have heard, that he intended several times, we're talking about multiple occasions, to throw himself from the tops of high mountains, multiple mountains, and every time he went up to the top of a mountain in order to throw himself down, notice that he actually set out to kill himself numerous times, Jibreel, that's Gabriel, would appear before him and say, O Muhammad, you are indeed Allah's messenger in truth, whereupon his heart would become quiet and he would calm down and would return home. So Gabriel had to regularly calm Muhammad down to keep him from plunging to his death. And whenever the period of the coming of the revelation used to become long, he would do as before, he'd head for a cliff. But when he used to reach the top of a mountain, Jibreel would appear before him and say to him what he had said before. Notice that this happened over and over again. Whenever Gabriel didn't show up with a new revelation, Muhammad would climb a mountain in order to kill himself. What can we learn about Muhammad from these passages?
Assalamu alaikum and hello to my non-Muslim viewers. Today I'm going to be refuting a a very specific story about the Prophet Muhammad. I'm going to be refuting David Wood, where he says that the Prophet Muhammad tried to commit suicide. So here we go. As you've seen in the clip before this, that David Wood cites three sources. Those three sources are Sahih Bukhari, Ibn Ishaq, and Al-Tabari. So let's start with Al-Tabari. According to the history of Al-Tabari, Volume 6, it's alleged, page 86, I believe, or page 86 or 87, I believe. The story goes that that Gabriel first started coming to the Prophet Muhammad, and then later on Gabriel didn't come, so the Prophet Muhammad was so sad by Gabriel not coming, or the revelation stopping for a period of days, that he tried to commit suicide by throwing himself off a cliff or a mountain. So according to Al-Tabari, Prophet Muhammad tried to commit suicide by throwing himself off a cliff or a mountain because Gabriel stopped coming to him. So now I looked into those narrations. Well, first of all, you don't even have to, in order to discount the story, you don't even have to look at the isnad or the chain of transmission, or what Hadith scholars have to say, or what Muslim scholars have to say about that story. You don't even have to do that. You don't even have to go that far. Just look at the source he's citing. He's citing Al-Tabari, the history of Al-Tabari. I have Al-Tabari's book right here, the volume 1 of Al-Tabari's book, and what does Al-Tabari say about his sources? What does he say about his work? According to Al-Tabari, pages 170. According to Al-Tabari, Volume 1, pages 170 to 171, he warns people that his books are filled with authentic and inauthentic stories about the Prophet Muhammad. So, in other words, Al-Tabari is admitting that his history books of Islamic characters, or his history books regarding biblical characters and Muslim characters, according to Al-Tabari's own admission, he has authentic stories and inauthentic stories. He has true stories about the Prophet Muhammad, and he has false stories about the Prophet Muhammad. So, but then you might be saying, well, why did Al-Tabari include it into his book if it's just fiction, if it's false, if it's fictional? Doesn't the criteria of embarrassment apply here? And no, it doesn't, because Muslim historians recorded whatever they heard. They didn't care if it was true or not. They just wrote it down. So of course Al-Tabari, Ibn Ishaq, and let's not get into Ibn Ishaq right now. We'll just stick to Al-Tabari. So of course Al-Tabari would write down any kind of story he heard. He didn't care if it was true or not. His job was just to collect the story and write the story. And again, you don't even need to go into Hadith sciences and what Muslim scholars have to say about it and the chains of transmission. You don't even have to go that far. Al-Tabari refutes himself. Al-Tabari is admitting that his stories are sometimes true and sometimes false, and this is a false story. So just look at the source he's citing. He's citing Al-Tabari, and Al-Tabari is a weak source. Muslim scholars don't accept it as authentic. And Al-Tabari even admits that he didn't always collect true stories. Muslim scholars have not always accepted Al-Tabari's narrations. That's why we need the isnad, or we need the chain of transmission to figure out if these stories are true or not. And according to the chain of transmission, the story of Al-Tabari is false, because there are two weak narrators in that story. According to several Muslim scholars, there's weak chains of transmission in Al-Tabari's book. For example, he says the story was learned from Muhammad ibn Ishaq, from Wahb bin Qasan, from Al-Zubair. So the chain of transmission includes people who are weak. So the weak narrators are Ibn Humayd and Muhammad al-Razi, who are very weak narrations. And a group of scholars have also declared him a liar. So you have these weak chains of weak chains of transmission in in Al-Tabari's book. So that means that the story is not true, because there's according to Islamic sciences, we have something called a isnad, or a chain of transmission, and that chain of transmission in that suicide story is weak. There are weak narrators in there, so this discounts the suicide story. Well, what's the second source he cites? The second source he cites is this book, Ibn Ishaq, The Life of Muhammad, a translation of Ibn Ishaq Sirat Rasulullah, translated by Alfred Guillaume. And the story is found on page 106. So let's look at the chain of transmission, since that's the way how we find out if there is a true or false story about the Prophet Muhammad. Now, when I looked at the chain of transmission, it says Wahab bin Qasim told me that Ubayd said, and that's it. That's a chain of transmission. So notice how there's missing gaps in the isnad, or the chain of transmission. All it says is Wahab bin Qasim told me that Ubayd said to him. So there's holes, or there's holes in the chains of transmission. There's missing gaps in the chain of transmission, and according to the paragraph above it, it says Wahab bin Qasim, a client of the family of Al-Zubair, told me. So basically, according to the chain of transmission in Ibn Ishaq and Al-Tabari's book, Al-Zubair is the chain of transmission that narrates the story. If we go to Al-Tabari, it says Ibn Ishaq from Wahab bin Qasim, the free man of the people of Al-Zubair, who heard it from Abdullah ibn Abu Zuhair. So Abu Zuhair Zuhair is in the chain of transmission. So what have Muslim scholars said about Al-Zubair? Is he authentic? No, he isn't, because I have this book called A Biography of the Prophet of Islam in Light of the Original Sources and Analytical Study, Volume 1. So let's look at what Muslim scholars have to say. Now, according to page 153 of this book, and again, I'm reading from Biography of the Prophet of Islam in Light of the Original Sources and Analytical Study, Volume 1, and this is by Dr. Mahdi Razaqullah Ahmad. So this is a very handy source about learning about early Islam and stuff like that. Anyways, it says on page 153, in any case, the Prophet, peace be upon him, was disturbed by the cessation to the extent that some biographers thought that he wished to throw himself down a cliff. But as Sheikh Albani is for those of you who don't know, Sheikh Albani was a great Hadith scholar. He was a great Muslim scholar, he was a great Hadith scholar. Sheikh Albani has pointed out that this is not a Hadith, rather it's a statement of Zuri. It is against the character and personality that the messengers are endowed with. And the footnote, it says you can find Albani's discussion about this in Da'if al-Nai Hadith Nin Nabi was Sira, page 40. So according to Sheikh Albani, this is not a hadith, or this is not a saying or action. This so-called suicide story is not a saying or action of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Rather, it's a statement of Zuri. So it just says that Zuri, heard the story and he passed he told the story. So there's no chain of transmission going all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad. It's just Zuri narrating a story. We don't know where Zuri got that story from. We don't know if his sources behind that story are reliable or not reliable. Now, the third source David Wood mentions is Sahih Bukhari, and this is found in Sahih Bukhari, Hadith number 6467. So I think David Wood's I think what he's trying to say is, even according to Muslims, most trusted source, which is Sahih Bukhari, Prophet Muhammad tried to commit suicide, thus that story has some credibility behind it. And is that the case? No, it isn't. Now, notice how in Sahih Bukhari 6467, it says that as we have heard. So, the hadith is saying that as we have heard. It's not saying that, we know that the Prophet Muhammad tried to commit suicide because the Prophet Muhammad said, I tried to commit suicide. No, it is, the wording is, as we have heard. So, so this story is nothing more but hearsay. It's not, it just, they heard the story. It doesn't, there's no chain of transmission going all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So, according to Ibn Hajar, and Ibn Hajar wrote a commentary on Sahih Bukhari, and Ibn Hajar was a prominent Muslim scholar, was a very important Muslim scholar back then. But anyways, he says, according to Fath al-Bari is a commentary on Sahih Bukhari, volume 19, page 449, he says, the one who says, as we have heard, fi ma balagh ha-na, is al-Zuri. This means the sentence that has reached us, as if from the reports of the Prophet, whom be the peace and blessings of Allah. In this narration, it is from amongst the unattributed reports of Zuri, and it's not fully linked. So basically what Ibn Hajar is saying is that there's a broken chain of transmission going back to Zuri. So so according to Ibn Hajar, this narration is not fully linked, or the chain of transmission doesn't go all the way back to al-Zuri. It just says al-Zuri heard the story. It doesn't say, there's a chain of transmission going all the way back to Zuri, and then that Zuri got the story from sources directly or related to the Prophet Muhammad. So the story is not the Prophet Muhammad, tried to commit suicide, and then he told some reliable people, and then those reliable people told Zuri, and then Zuri, passed the story from the chain of transmissions and the early Hadith collections to Sahih Bukhari. No, it goes, Sahih Bukhari heard it from Zuri, and Zuri heard it from some unknown people. So that's basically the story. So according to other sources, there's the story goes that they heard the story of the Prophet Muhammad trying to commit suicide. It's not that there's no fully connected chain of transmission to validate that story. And this is found in Sheikh Albani's book. And this is also found in other people's books. For example, Ibn Hajar, like I said, and then there's other Muslim scholars who have discounted the story. For example, Abu Shama al-Muqdisi said that this is a statement from al-Zuri or someone else other than Aisha. And in that phrase, it is what has reached us. The story just goes back to al-Zuri. It does not go back to the Prophet Muhammad or anybody directly related to the Prophet Muhammad. It just says, well, al-Zuri heard it. That's pretty much about it. And again, Sheikh Albani talks about this, in his book and stuff like that. So even Ibn Hisham, in Ibn Hisham volume 1, page 252 to 253, says he just heard the story from Ibn Ishaq, and he doesn't give any kind of chain of transmission. So even Ibn Hisham, he left out the narration, or he said even Ibn Hisham admitted that the narration is weak. So, and this is found in Ibn Hisham volume 1, page 4. So he thought that story was weak as well. And other people and other scholars have also said that that story is not authentic. It's not authentically reported and stuff like that. So again, I would just recommend to see why the story is false in Sahih Bukhari. I would just recommend reading Ibn Hajar's commentary, Al-Tabari Volume 19, page 449, where he talks about how there's broken chains of transmission in that story. That the chain of transmission isn't fully linked, going back to Al-Zuri, going back to the Prophet Muhammad. And another thing is, just because it is true that that suicide story is mentioned in Sahih Bukhari, but in the footnote of Bukhari, in the original Arabic book of Bukhari, in the footnotes, Bukhari admits that that story is weak, or there's missing links in that chain of transmission, and so even Bukhari, who Sunni Muslims, which is like 85% of the Muslim population, or 90% of the Muslim population, so a majority of Muslims follow. The Orthodox Sunni Muslims follow Sahih Bukhari, and even other these subsect of these other subsect of Islam of Muslims follow Sahih Bukhari. Anyways, Bukhari admits that there's some hadith in his books that have weak chains of transmissions and stuff like that. So most of Bukhari's hadith are correct. That's true, but sometimes Bukhari admits that there are a few hadith where there's broken chains of transmission, and according to the Arabic book version of Sahih Bukhari, this is a broken chain of transmission. This story has a broken chain of transmission, or there's broken links in that chain of transmission. So this story is false. There's no reliable source that talks about Prophet Muhammad trying to commit suicide and stuff like that. There's all the sources that say that the Prophet Muhammad tried to commit suicide is false. And Prophet Muhammad was confident that he is the messenger, that he is God's messenger, and Allah will never neglect him. We read in Sahih Bukhari, Hadith number 4842, that the Prophet Muhammad said, "I am Allah's messenger, and Allah will never neglect me." That means that God will always be there with the Prophet Muhammad, protecting the Prophet Muhammad, and things like that. So the story of Prophet Muhammad trying to commit suicide is false. David Wood is just appealing to weak sources like Ibn Ishaq, Al-Tabari, and he's not reading what Muslim scholars say about the chain of transmission that Sahih Bukhari Hadith. Well, you might be saying, well, why do we have to follow Muslim scholars? Because the Quran says follow the Prophet Muhammad. The Prophet Muhammad said follow Muslim scholars, and the Prophet Muhammad said the best generations would be the three generations that come after him. So Ibn Hajar and Ibn Hajar would be a Muslim scholar, and even early Muslim scholars like Ibn Hisham and stuff like that, even they admitted that that this story is weak, and there's no fully connected chain of transmission going all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad. It just goes to Al-Zuri, and Al-Zuri says, well, he just heard the story. So anybody before Al-Zuri could have just made up that story and told him. And then Ibn Ishaq and Al-Tabari could have written it down, and then that could have passed to Bukhari, and Bukhari, just wrote down what Al-Zuri thought. But then Bukhari himself admitted that there's no fully chain of transmission going all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad. So the story of Prophet Muhammad trying to commit suicide is false. But David Wood just, he'll never. I think he understands, but he just wants to push his argument for some reason. That's why I think there's no point in interacting with him, because no matter how many times you tell him Ibn Ishaq and Al-Tabari, and there's weak stories in Ibn Ishaq and Al-Tabari and things like that, and he's not reading Hadith commentaries. No matter how many times you correct him, he'll just keep repeating the same argument over and over and over again. And to a lesser extent, Sam Shimon and James White do this too. So that's why I say there's no point in interacting with them, because I think they get it, but they just want to keep repeating the argument. So there's no point in directly addressing them. So this is my indirect address to David Wood using that suicide story. So that suicide story is false. There's no fully connected chain of transmission in Ibn Ishaq and Al-Tabari and in Sahih Bukhari. So that's all I want to say about that. Thanks a lot.